thank you for joining us. I appreciate you being able to join us virtually, and as we're now doing our virtual SCSU Swine Day this year. And as I've said a couple times, yeah, this morning, this is another curveball in the 2020 year that it's been. So with appreciation for everyone for joining us in this way and following along. So
yeah, well, thank you. Yep, thanks for having me.
So Angie Krieger is the Vice President of Domestic Marketing for the National Pork Board. There, she's responsible for strategic oversight of the National Pork Board's marketing efforts in the U.S., including both consumer and channel marketing. Since joining the Pork Checkoff in 2017, Krieger has been responsible for building relationships with all segments of the pork packing and processing community in order to ensure National Pork Board's product marketing, issues management, education, and research initiatives are aligned with packer and processor priorities. Krieger has also had oversight for relationships with and activities with retail and food service channel partners, which are essential to keeping pork top of mind with U.S. consumers. Before joining the National Pork Board staff in 2017, Krieger was the Director of Animal Welfare at JBS Live Pork. While there, she developed and administered a comprehensive animal welfare program crossing 7 states. She also served as liaison with the National Pork Board on the Common Swine Industry Audit information, including participating in the Industry Audit Task Force. From 2001 to 2015, Krieger worked at Cargill Meat Solutions Corporation, where she first served as a lawyer, providing advice on issues including product sale and purchasing agreements. She later accepted a role in the pork business as a strategic account manager in hog procurement. In 2011, Krieger became a regional supply team leader, where she led a team of 6 hog supply managers. Krieger's experiences at Cargill and then JBS have touched every aspect of the pork supply chain from farm to fork. Krieger graduated from the University of Nebraska with a Juris Doctor degree in law and from Oklahoma State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in animal science. She lives in Grimes, Iowa with her 4 daughters. And with that, I will welcome you again and turn the floor to you.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's humbling to hear you talk about me in such wonderful terms, and it also makes me feel a little old. I've had a lot of experiences to this date, and when you get to 2020 and think about being in an industry for over 20 years, boy, how things have changed. But today I'm here to talk about our new master brand strategy at the Pork Board. I hope maybe some of you have heard about it. It's called Real Pork, but also just to share some insights with you about what consumers are thinking today, how we need to continue to evolve as an industry in order to meet those consumers where we are. And we're going to talk about how things are about to get real. So first of all, my first slide, this is all about being authentic, right? And I greatly appreciate Ryan reading to you I think that's my official bio from the National Pork Board. But at the end of the day, I'm a mom, and I'm a farm girl from North Central Iowa. And so I wanted to kind of set the stage for you all about the passion that I have for real pork. And a lot of it stems from that guy there in the middle. That's my Grandpa Gene. And on September 1st, Grandpa Gene turned 90. We would have all loved to be able to gather around him and celebrate. This was actually his 89th birthday when we visited him. But unfortunately, Grandpa's nursing home in eastern Iowa was in the midst of a COVID outbreak. And he actually himself survived COVID earlier this year. I'm so thankful for that. And my heart breaks for all of those who have not been so fortunate. They used to call Grandpa heavy duty back in the day, and I think his old healthy farmer immunity might have gotten him through COVID. But you know, Grandpa's the reason that I work in agriculture today. So when I was growing up, my grandpa was a master farmer in North Central Iowa. I remember him having a lot of jackets and hats and plaques from the seed corn companies that he worked with. And despite only having an 8th grade education, he made row crop farming look easy. It wasn't until I was later in college and took an agronomy class that I really truly understood all the science that Grandpa had to know in order to raise the corn and the soybeans that he did. He was also an excellent stockman, and I got my passion for livestock from him. He bought me the first heifer that I showed at the county fair as soon as I was old enough. And we spent a lot of time together in my high school years, traveling around to various shows. And that's, we spent a lot of time hanging out on the fence talking too. And I learned the value of hard work. I learned how important it was to be able to talk to all kinds of people. And I also learned from Grandpa that I could be anything that I wanted to be if I put my mind to it. Now, much to his chagrin, I went to law school. He was proud of me being a lawyer. I'm not sure he was quite as proud of me when I became a hog buyer, but that's a story for another day. But it was under Grandpa's guidance and his example that I learned the value of being straightforward and honest and authentic. Grandpa, I kind of chuckle every time I see this picture. He has dementia now, and he's a Cardinals fan. But one of his caregivers at the nursing home had this Cubs jacket, and I think at one point in time he was watching a Cubs baseball game, and so they brought him the Cubs jacket. 20 years ago, he would never have been photographed wearing a Cubs jacket, but that always makes me chuckle a little bit. My daughters, on the other hand, are authentic in a completely different way. So you see there, my 3 teenage daughters, Claire and Blythe, are on the left side of your screen. They're seniors in high school this year and choosing their path in college. And then my daughter Drew is a sophomore. And then my little one, Quinn, she's not quite into social media like the others. But authenticity to this next generation is incredibly different than the authenticity that I was taught by Grandpa. I mean, even as we're on screens today, and I know we would rather be in person, we're learning to communicate in different ways. And the generation that my daughters are in have access to information in a completely different way than we ever did. And what we probably could have ever imagined. And so as I talk about the consumers today, we're talking about my daughters. Maybe some of you I can't see everyone on the screen, so I know some of you probably are in the Gen Z, in the millennial generation, and these are the consumers that we're really focused on as we put out our new messaging around real pork. So, first of all, we have to change. We know that what got pork to 2019 is not going to get it to 2021 and beyond. If I think back again to even 2009 or 1999, pork was much different, and the way we were consuming it was much different. Consumption is different because people are thinking about meals in a different way. The 3 meals that I ate growing up, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, have morphed into a series of snacks. My daughters often, last night is a perfect example. I got home, one of them had a practice, the other was going to work. They grabbed something out of the fridge. I was all ready to grill pork chops, which still are a family favorite, even despite the fact that I'm going to talk about how center of the plate protein is not as popular with the next generation. But they'd already all eaten, and so we saved the pork chops for tonight. They're just consuming food completely differently. What consumers are seeking and valuing is different too. Because they're exposed to so many messages in social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, a lot of people are getting their news in those bite-sized nuggets. And so being able to tell a long, drawn-out story is not going to work. We have to find a way to connect quickly and get our message across and really create a feeling in that consumer about what pork is and what pork can mean to them and their family. The good news is consumers do see pork fitting into their favorite cuisines and recipes. And so we'll talk about this a little bit later, but multicultural flavors are incredibly popular right now. And especially in the midst of COVID, the quarantines that we had earlier in the year, and the fact that food service in a lot of geographies still isn't up to where it would have been normally. It's people are having that wanderlust for the flavors that they would eat at their favorite Mexican restaurant, if you will, or their favorite Asian restaurant. And they know that pork fits really authentically into those cuisines. So we'll talk about that a bit more. At the end of the day, there's our chop, but consumers are moving from this beautiful center of the plate pork chop to more of this, where pork is an ingredient, and we definitely can fit into that mindset for consumers. We're just going to have to think about different ways to get our products in their hands. So the good news is pork is important to consumers. My team at the National Pork Board has been doing consumer research for many, many years, but in the last 3 years, we've invested heavily in what we called a demand landscape. And that was where we asked 10,000 consumers the who, what, where, when, why, and how of pork. And we wanted to know everything about what they were buying, how they were buying it, what meals they were consuming it at. And we've utilized that research heavily, and we still continue to wring out the last drops from the dish rag, if you will. But we found out through that research that 97% of households in the US did buy pork. And that is a tremendous statistic for us to have. 79% of those households bought both fresh and processed pork. So when you think about the 97%, bacon helps us out a lot there, no doubt. Bacon is our hero. It's the gateway drug, if you will, to pork, and we love riding the coattails of that flavor. But to have almost 80% of households buying fresh pork as well is incredible. And this statistic over here is really interesting. We've utilized this a lot with retailers. When I say that $380, that pork shoppers are worth $380 more than both chicken and beef shoppers, that's when you look at the total cart ring. So what we know is consumers regularly have chicken and beef on their grocery lists. When we went out and did shop-alongs with consumers, those are the two top proteins, top of mind, easy go-tos. When consumers have pork in the cart, they're also buying chicken and beef. So if retailers can get consumers focused on buying more pork, they're going to have higher cart totals. And that is good for retailers, and it's a really good motivation for them to help us promote our products. So while these are wonderful statistics, historically consumers do underspend their fresh protein dollars on pork. I'm not going to talk a lot about coronavirus or what happened during COVID during this presentation. No doubt it's had a significant impact on our marketing efforts, but it is important to note that during the past 6 months at retail, pork has gained share, and most of that share has come from chicken. And so this is definitely a good motivation, good momentum as we go into 2021 and our next marketing efforts. We also asked consumers just recently, this was in the second quarter of this year, what are the most important factors to you when you're purchasing meat? And probably no surprise, 60% said, tastes good, it has to taste good. Almost half said the most important factor to them was that it would be good for them and good for their family. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but good for me and good for my family means something different to consumers today than it ever did before. And certainly as we've gone through panic buying and shortages at the grocery store, it also factors in that supply chain and how the products are getting to the family. 37% said the most important factor to them is that their meat be routine and versatile. And frankly, this is an area where pork has opportunity. We've done wonderfully this year with ground pork, as an ingredient, and pulled pork is often used as an ingredient. But we can do a better job merchandising loins, for example, chopping them into pieces like our counterparts in chicken have done, so that people see it as a cubed item that can go on top of a salad or in a pasta dish. Easy prep, 35% says easy prep is most important. And any of you who are doing the cooking in your household, even though we've probably spent more time at home and more cooking in this past year, nobody wants to spend a long time in the kitchen unless they're a culinary expert or a chef, right? We like to have something that's pretty easy to prepare so we can actually enjoy the food with our families. 25% say that the most important factor to them when purchasing meat is good for the planet. And this is something we really have our eye on as we move into next year and we think about how we're connecting with consumers. Pork has an awesome sustainability story. My colleague Brett Kaysen here continues to build that out, and that will be something that we continue to celebrate as we move into the next year. So pork has tremendous opportunity, bottom line, and we're going to talk about that opportunity now. And I would also say I'm glad I'll answer all the questions you have at the end, but if anybody has a burning question as we go along, please don't hesitate to jump in and interrupt me. I'm glad to answer questions as we go as well. Also just want to call out, this is some of the beautiful new photography that we've done this year. You see those pork tinga tacos, delicious. We prepared it in our innovation kitchen here at the National Pork Board just last week, and it was very good. So that recipe is on our website, I believe. So we've talked about how pork has a place in these evolving eating regimens. And when we talk about regimens, it's not just about diets, although certainly there have been a lot of popular ones over the past years. The Atkins diet, as we know, many years ago was really good for protein. Keto has been an incredibly popular diet over the past year. But a lot of people also are talking about being veggie forward or wanting to have more vegetables in their diet. And no doubt that's important. A balanced diet is important. But we know that pork can play a really important role there. One, by bringing flavor, but also by bringing the protein and doing it in a way that can be very health conscious. We have a really wide portfolio of products that come from the pig. And amongst those, the loin and tenderloin are incredibly high protein and low fat, and in fact are certified by the American Heart Association. So we make sure that we celebrate that with our consumers. I talked a little bit about pork as an ingredient, but let's just unpack that a little more. Because consumers are looking for less of that center of the plate meal, something a little lighter, maybe something that they're meal prepping at the beginning of the week. Meal prep has become a really big thing, especially with single people who are, they want to eat healthy. They want to kind of have a meal plan for the week. So they prep their meals at the beginning of the week. Using pork as an ingredient is really important for that, because what they want to do is they want to prepare their protein, whatever that may be. Chicken breasts, pork loin, ground beef, ground pork. They want to prepare the protein and then put that protein in various meals throughout the week, so they're not eating the same thing every day. It's really important as an industry that we pay more attention to how we're merchandising our products at retail so that our consumers see pork as an ingredient. While you and I, being in the pork industry, will look at a pork loin and say, wow, I can get a lot of meals out of that. I can cut some chops out of the center, have a loin roast, maybe cube some for a pasta dish or a salad, and maybe even make some tacos with part of it. The average consumer doesn't see that. Frankly, they're overwhelmed. So as we move into a possible recession, again, later this year with quarantines coming back, that message about cooking once and eating 2 or 3 times is something that we lean into really heavily with consumers as well. consumers need to see pork as part of a solution. So when I say this, I'm not just talking about a meal solution. We saw that 25% of folks who really are truly interested and concerned about the environment. And as we're building out our sustainability story for consumers, they need to see that the pork industry is part of that solution. They need to see how we have improved over the years and how we have just a culture of continuous improvement, and we'll continue to be part of that. We're starting to talk about the carbon neutral pig, and science says that's possible. Consumers think it's important. So it's something that we'll need to continue to focus on and do more research on to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're not giving up other benefits that pork has globally. And you see these folks here dining out, and we certainly are mindful of what a rough year it's been for our food service partners. But we're starting to talk to them more as they're rebuilding menus to make sure that people understand that pork cuts really are perfect for shareables, like these individual ribs on the plate, appetizers, and anytime you're looking at a protein forward diet, people get burned out on chicken breast and beef, and they want alternatives. And so we're going to continue to promote pork as that tasty alternative. Multicultural flavors. I mentioned this a minute ago, and I know it's a little early for lunch, but I probably by the end of this presentation, you all will have your stomachs growling because mine already is. It's this beautiful Latino dish that we cooked up for one of our recent photo shoots. We know that 1 in 3 Americans consume foods that contain multicultural flavors at least once a week. And when we're talking multicultural, we're not just talking about Mexican or Hispanic flavors, we're talking about Asian and Italian, and pork plays wonderfully into all of these cuisines. We're also starting to see some interesting cuisines from South Africa and from Europe and other parts of the country. And so this is something that we'll continue to monitor. And as we're talking to the weary quarantine cook, and most folks are weary of cooking right now, right? Everybody has their standards. I think that statistics show that most people have 5 to 8 go-to recipes in their families, and people are darn sick of those by now. So we're going to continue to inspire people with new recipes. Pork plays a really authentic role in these multicultural dishes. So there's that word again, authenticity. Around the world, pork is the #1 protein. Now we might lose that status in this last year, but only because production in China was so down due to African swine fever. But we'll be right back there. Again, we'll bounce right back up. #1 protein around the world, and yet we're #3 in the United States. And so people need to understand where that flavor profile comes from and why it's so important. When asked what pork dishes people crave, 51% indeed say Mexican and Latin pork dishes, but almost 50% said Asian pork dishes. So not only are acculturated folks in the United States enjoying these cuisines more, we have growing populations of Hispanic and Asian Americans. And we know this in the Midwest. I mean, a lot of the folks that do really good hard work at the slat level for us or in our plants are of some sort of Hispanic descent. And so we do market very directly to the Hispanic consumer. My colleague Jose De Jesus is our director of multicultural marketing, and he works with an agency down in Miami. They're focused on food trucks right now, not just in Miami, but also in El Paso, Texas, and in Los Angeles, and looking at how these foods are fused with other cultures even, and it's some really delicious content. So I said I wouldn't talk about COVID too much, but it's too big of a topic to ignore, as you all know. COVID-19 absolutely awakened our consumers to pork's appeal. There's no doubt about it that we benefited at retail from the fact that consumers were not eating out, eating it at food service as much. When you think about the pork products that go into food service, certainly we've seen less bacon and sausage sold through breakfast. I used to travel about 80% of the time, and any of you who are frequent travelers know that almost every hotel anymore has a breakfast in the morning, or they did. I haven't traveled since COVID hit, but I have colleagues who have, and those breakfasts have changed drastically. Their muffins or their cereal and a box of milk or a pastry. So that protein that we were getting pull through from that's not being sold. Now, sausage and bacon have been up a lot at retail, so we've made up some of that. And we're starting to see, especially with the quick service restaurants, more and more folks going back to grabbing breakfast as they're heading back to work in the morning, going through the drive-through. But we don't sell a tremendous amount of fresh pork in food service. So the gains that we've had in retail, which are on pace with the entire category. So the statistics that I saw yesterday showed that the entire meat category was up about 30% in price or in value, and pork was up 31%. So we're right on pace, in fact, outpacing the entire meat category a little bit more at retail. And this is something to keep our eye on. We're very focused on making sure that those consumers who purchased pork in 2020 at retail, who might not have before, that they come back. And I'll talk to you a little bit more later on about how we can specifically target those consumers. But these were some other trackers that we were doing. So the entire time that we were in the crisis of COVID, while a lot of our team at the National Pork Board was very focused on the supply chain, and certainly we know that we had a lot of challenges with our plants not being able to be open, and we had pigs backing up on the farm, and we were working with producers to help them tap into resources that we have available here, whether it be on humane euthanasia or limit feeding. But my team remained focused on moving product through the system because we knew and we had confidence that the supply chain would work those other issues out, and we needed to keep pork moving. And we were able to do that. Not only was pork the only protein that consumers wanted to purchase more of during the second quarter of this year, but it outperformed all other proteins as we were looking at social discussions on the web. And we were also very encouraged by the fact that while consumers were really concerned about the employees at our plants who were experiencing the coronavirus, they didn't lose trust in our products. They didn't feel that pork was any less safe. And they also were really interested in hearing about how the packers were meeting the employees' needs and how we were doing that throughout the industry. So we've talked a lot about how consumers have changed, how they continue to change. But I will tell you, many years ago, the person that would have sat in my role was focused on these questions. And we still are today. What's a good way to cook this? What goes with this? So we have a lot of resources available on our current website, and we'll have even more on the newpork.org when it goes live at the end of this year, to help consumers learn how to cook, to help them learn how to do something different with that pork chop that they have, or maybe find a new ground pork recipe. Again, ground pork's been incredibly popular. But they're asking this, and they're looking for these resources, not just on our website, but on sites like YouTube. So a lot of consumers are learning how to cook on YouTube, and it's important that we work with influencers in that space and let them talk to their followers in a really authentic way again. So it's interesting, some of the content that we've sponsored on YouTube, you can hardly tell that it's Pork Board sponsored. It's just a gentleman or a lady in their kitchen at home cooking pork for their family and enjoying it. But that is the way for us to reach these consumers differently. And we know that reaching, especially the young millennial and Gen Z consumers, now is very important, because that is the time when people are developing their cooking skills and thinking about how they want to build their grocery list, which again, we've got to get pork into that list. I think our new dietitian here, she used to work at retail, and we were talking about numbers yesterday. And the average grocery store has about 33,000 items in it. And people regularly buy a couple dozen of those items. And so when you think about the noise in the marketplace, we've got to figure out a way to get pork on that list so it stays on the list. Today's consumers, though, are asking those first two questions, but they're also asking, where is this from? Who made this? How was it raised? And were you protecting the planet while you did it? How do you communicate such big topics to consumers in a bite size, right? Much more than 6 seconds, and we've lost that average consumer's attention. They don't consume content the way that we did. They don't read long form articles. We're doing a lot more video and trying to understand. And so as we think about building a brand around pork, that's why it's more important today now than ever that we evoke an emotion in consumers. We know that is a way to capture their attention and hopefully hold it. Consumers are more and more calling for what we are seeking to give them with the Real Pork Master Brand, and that is real and authentic. So these are amazing statistics, but when you think about the fact that 60% of consumers say farmers are on my side when it comes to helping me stay healthy, that tells me we need to have farmers telling their own stories more and telling it in a way that my grandpa would have told it, standing next to the fence or standing in the co-op. They don't want to see, fancy pictures. They're okay with the fact that farming is hard work and that pigs get dirty. They just want to know what we're doing. When you think about the way our farms are built, and I have to give a shout out to the team at South Dakota State right now. The facility that you all have there is wonderful, and we are so appreciative of the opportunity to do virtual tours with some of our stakeholders, and not just with students or people who are interested, but with really important stakeholders like retailers who are making decisions in their organizations about animal welfare policies, and with retail dietitians who are advising some of their clients about whether or not pork meets all those attributes of good for you. So thank you to your team there, and we look forward to continuing that partnership. 38% want to know about the farm their meat came from. That's a little scary, right? It's when we were growing up, like everybody in town knew my grandpa. Everybody in town, knew the kind of farming that he did, and we would often have people come by locker cabs from us. But that's just not the way the world works. And in an industry where consumers have been increasingly critical of how we raise our pigs, it's pretty scary. I just asked a producer recently to do a photo shoot for us at their farm, and I'm so thankful that they did. But in doing that, we open ourselves up to those consumers who are quite vocal. I'm telling you, we have to do that. We've been talking about it for years. We've got to open the doors, and we've got to be open to a little bit of criticism. I can assure you it passes pretty quickly, and there's a whole team here at the National Pork Board that's ready to help those producers who are willing to speak out. 69% of households are making more than 80% of their meals at home. This is a trend that, we've watched closely. It doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. Again, we're all sitting here in front of our screens this morning instead of being in a room together. And it's very likely that school districts are going to start making the difficult decision, at least where I'm at in Iowa, to send kids home and do virtual school as case counts continue to rise again this winter. And so that means a lot more meals at home. You all saw my 4 daughters. And for anyone who thinks that teenage girls don't eat as much as boys, I'll challenge you on that. I've cooked more in the last year between not traveling and being home, not having activities with the girls in the evenings, than I probably had in the last 5, maybe even 10 years. And I enjoy it a lot. But there is that weariness setting in, as I've mentioned before. And so we'll continue to figure out how we can help inspire consumers. But we also recently did some research about the psychology of the family meal, and we're able to share through a renowned family psychologist named Lori Gottlieb, who's been on the Today Show, and she's a New York Times bestselling writer. She just recently talked to TV stations around the country about how the family meal is important, how teenagers really enjoy sharing stories with their families at the meal, and how she and her family utilize the pork.org website and recipes to enjoy pork at those meals. So we can connect on an emotional level with consumers in that way as well. And, as you see in that green box down there, 50% of people are saying that eating at home with their family is important. And again, we don't expect that to change. 49% of shoppers, here's that weary quarantine cook, say their biggest challenge is new ideas or lack of inspiration to cook. So if we were in the room together, I always like to have, good participation. I'd say, everybody take out a piece of paper and jot down just really quickly, 5 to 10 go-to recipes that you cook or that have been handed down through your family. So just kind of mentally do that right now. Like, think about the things that you make for your family, or your mom made for you, or you plan to make when things get back to more normal on a regular basis. And it's pretty easy, and most lists would look somewhat the same. You've got sandwiches, maybe burgers are thrown in there, spaghetti, tacos, some other kind of pasta dish. If you're from Minnesota, some sort of a hot dish, or in Iowa, we call those casseroles. So the tater tot casserole would go on my list. But, you think about how boring those things get after a while. So I never have lack of inspiration. I have colleagues here who are cooking in the kitchen, and we send recipes around all the time, but that's not the norm. And so we're trying to find out where consumers are really looking for those inspirations. When you think about Pinterest or Facebook or Instagram, those would be big social areas for us to do that. But we're also talking to retailers. How can we make it really easy for the consumer? So I know for me, if I could go on a retailer's website, say my local Hy-Vee, and I could say, I really want to try this new pork tinga dish. And I just clicked on the recipe and it filled my cart with the ingredients, that would be amazing. It would be so much easier for me than going through and searching for each thing. And that's assuming I'm doing online shopping, which I have been doing a lot of, and a lot of consumers are. And again, likely will be doing more of in the future, because they found out how convenient it is. So we've got to find those consumers where they are, whether it be an app, a popular app that they're searching. We were just recently on Hallmark Home and Family and had them feature a pork dish. So we know that that's a really popular website, and especially going into the holidays, we'll have for the next month or so what they call a listicle on that website, and folks can find some new pork recipes. I saved the orange box for last because I think it's really important. And when I say really, I'm doing that a little bit tongue in cheek. But don't get hung up. I know there's a lot of scientists on the phone. Don't get hung up on the labels. We know as animal scientists and as scientists what carnivores and omnivores are. And we know that all people are omnivores. But at least 73% of these folks who classify themselves as carnivores, so heavy meat eaters, like people who are never going to give up meat, and 63% of people who said, you know, I like to have a balanced diet. I find it's important to eat both meat and vegetables. They agree that real meat is the best source of protein. And in fact, there's science that shows that meat from animals is a more complete source of protein than a lot of the veggie-based burgers and veggie-based proteins that we're starting to see in the market. And so we will continue to share that data in a very factual way. We have a new dietitian on staff who is currently working on her strategy for next year. And while plant-based proteins certainly are a competitor and they get a lot of airtime, we need to be mindful of competing with all of the proteins when we're talking about pork. We need to learn from our counterparts in the chicken industry about how they've made, you know, the chicken breast ubiquitous when it comes to convenient, easy, healthy cooking. And we need to learn from ground beef, which is a staple ingredient in a lot of those hot dishes that I mentioned, or other things, because ground pork can be that beautiful substitute that gives a different flavor profile. We just have to help consumers understand that value. So through our research and through discussions the last year, we have identified 7 opportunities. So this is all about opportunity. 7 opportunities to win with consumers, and not just to win with their pocketbooks, but to tug at the heartstrings, to win with that, evoking that emotion. Flavor is obvious. I mentioned bacon because we can't talk about flavor in the pork portfolio without talking about bacon. But the myriad flavors that we have, when you think about when you bring into just the pork itself, all of the different multicultural flavors that pork pairs well with, flavor is a winner, and it is how we will initially connect with probably 90% of the consumers. We've got to win them over on flavor so that we can open their minds to talk about some of these bigger issues. Craveable falls right into that category. When we think about craveability, though, this leans a lot towards food service. So as a food service operator, those who are long-standing, if you think about your favorite chains, they have items on their menu that people crave. No doubt there's, you know, you can probably have something that comes top of mind right now, like a dish that you're just craving if you could get to your local restaurant to have. Pork is very craveable. And as we've done research in food service, we find that time and time again that pork can be a draw for restaurants, but we are not always easy to cook in the back of the house because pork sometimes requires a little bit more skill than some of those cooks will have. Now, that's not to say that we can't innovate, that we can't provide operators with pork that comes in packages that makes it more foolproof for the cooks they have in their kitchen. But that's something that we continue to focus on here, is trying to get more pork on menus. Connections, when you think about the connections that we make through food, they're very important. And as we're coming up on a holiday season, that's no doubt going to look a lot different for a lot of people. We're thinking about how we can encourage people to make those connections virtually. That's not as fun, and we all know that. Just last week, I was talking to a colleague about how when we started doing Zoom, and my team is spread out around the country, so we didn't get together a lot anyway. But you know, we were trying to make things a little more lighthearted, especially in the midst of some of the worst weeks of our supply chain issues. And so we would have a Zoom happy hour. Bring the beverage of your choice and let's just sit and not talk about work. Let's just sit and chat. And at the beginning, that was kind of fun. It was, a different way to be on Zoom, but now we're all on so many Zoom calls. So ideas like bringing up the same recipe and cooking with your family who's across the country and sharing in the same flavors. There might be some of that going on this holiday, but people are getting pretty burnt out on this being across the table from a camera. So we're going to try to find ways that people can connect through recipes if they're not able to connect with their families during the holidays. I'm going to leave the farm to fork story for the last. So I'm going to skip over to family meals. And again, just talking about those connections, but no doubt family meals have seen a reawakening, if you will. I love it. I love being able to eat dinner with my kids a lot more often than I had in the previous years. And families are saying that's something they want to keep around. So we'll continue to do research to make sure that we're helping consumers with that. There's a lot of folks that are just suffering from anxiety and what's going to happen. I've gone a whole hour almost without mentioning the election today. The only thing that I'll say is please go vote. But there's a lot of anxiety around that, around what's going to happen. There's anxiety around what's going to happen with coronavirus as we get deeper into the winter and into 2021. And geez, is 2021 even going to be any better than 2020? So family meals are that time of day when you can sit down and sit around and just talk about your day and enjoy your family. And I'm proud that we're doing the work that we are to make sure that pork can be a part of that. When we talk about good for me and my family, I mentioned earlier that this means something very different than it did even 2 years ago. And of course, the obvious messaging around good for me and my family is the wonderful nutritional story that we have about pork. And we will continue to talk to consumers about nutrition, about protein content. We need to find ways to do that that's not so sterile. So people, I'll use the example of vegetables. And with my 7-year-old, when you talk to her about eating a wide variety of vegetables, oh mom, I don't want to do that. When you talk to her about eating the rainbow, boy, that kind of sounds fun, right? I can eat some vegetables from some different colors and fruits, and I can eat the rainbow. So we've got to find ways to connect with the consumers from that age on up. We're working with a variety of different organizations on building content for teachers to use in their educational programs at school. And as we do that, we're weaving in the farm story. So that's why I always talk about farm to fork and sustainability and stewardship last. We've got to weave those stories in a way that's really authentic. You probably could predict that I was going to say that word. I think about the books that my daughters read about the farm when they were growing up, and what you see are, pigs out in the pig pen getting dirty, and folks think that that's the way it should be. Like that's what they saw, dirty pigs out rolling around in the mud. And boy, if we can't see into those buildings, then there must be something nefarious going on. So we've got to find ways to open those doors and show people that we are raising pigs the way we are today, so that it is good for them and good for their family. And that includes the entire farm to fork story, and it includes all of our efforts around sustainability and stewardship. And so telling the farm to fork story will be probably the biggest focus for my team in 2021. We're doing okay with consumers with flavor and craveability. We've shown those results at retail this year, and we think we can go with that momentum, and we can start folding in some of those additional stories. But we will need the help of everyone in the industry to do that. We're going to need for people to see that the farmers raising their pigs are real people, just like them. And the people promoting their products are real moms, just like me. And so we'll be working to do that and really connect with those consumers exactly where they are. And when I show you these 7 opportunities to win with consumers, then what I'll show you is that these are our 7 brand truths for real pork. So when consumers see the blue pork pick 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe a little sooner, this is what we want them to think about. This is how we want to evoke those emotions in them. And we want them to connect with us and with our industry in a really authentic way. We want to make sure that they feel good about our products, not just that they enjoy them or that they see them as a wonderful ingredient to pair with their favorite side dishes, but that they see pork as part of their lifestyle. And only by doing that can we pass that along to the next generation. And I know I'm finishing up a little early, but I'm hoping that there are a lot of great questions, because this is what I want to leave you with. It takes a constant commitment to relevance to win in a changing marketplace. What has worked for our industry in the past simply won't work going forward. So while all of our farmers are back on the farm working hard to produce pork in the most sustainable, safe way possible, our team will be working to continue to connect with consumers to make sure that everyone from farm to fork in our supply chain knows how we can win with those folks. And with that, I would love to have discussion, questions. I'm most comfortable asking marketing questions, but I will open it up for you to ask anything that is relevant to the pork checkoff.
All right, thank you for that presentation. And again, yeah, if there are questions, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question, or if more comfortable, ask them in the chat function, and I can ask them. So here's one that's shown up in the chat. It says, National Pork Board has done a lot of work to understand the characteristics of the primary target market audience. What are specific programs that have been started or are intending to start in addition or related to the Real Pork marketing campaign?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I mentioned a few really important targets for us. One of those being the younger generation. So the older Gen Z who are starting to buy and have a lot of buying power, frankly, and the younger millennials. Not that we're writing off the older millennials or my generation, Gen X. The content that we're creating is certainly relevant to all of them. But with our focus on digital marketing, we're really keyed in on that younger demographic, and also multicultural. And that multicultural group actually skews a lot younger, so it's all pretty consistent. But as we think about some of the things we have coming up, we continue to work with YouTube influencers. And so again, we know that the younger generation is consuming a lot of content on YouTube, and if you look at the measurements for that, we can tell how long people watch videos, which is really important. Just the fact that somebody clicked on a video, the impressions that we get, the impressions would be in the hundreds of millions. But we also can tell how long people are watching those videos, and so it's like 600 football games, or like you think about the content that's being consumed, and that's just pork content. So we'll continue to do that with YouTube. Our messaging right now is around pork as a passport. And that plays a couple different ways. One, people aren't traveling right now, and they're not eating out a lot. So how can pork be a passport to other parts of the world through your taste buds? But also the talking about pork as a global protein, and how people can really get out of that rut of the quarantine cooking. So those would be some of our current initiatives. And as I mentioned, we're going to bring that farm to fork story in a little bit this fall. We've got some connections that we've made with producers and global chefs, and we'll be airing that on our YouTube channel soon, where they're actually in their own kitchens talking about production and then talking about a certain recipe and cooking that recipe together. And it's really cool to see how those connections are being made.
Okay, next one here. I've heard that people / consumers have less confidence in the science than they once did. What can we do as researchers to gain back that confidence? Researchers, scientists, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting. I'm not sure. I don't know if I would characterize it as consumers not having as much confidence in the science, although there's some data that shows that. But I think we just have to do a better job of communicating the science to the consumer in a way that they can receive it. I mentioned, like the attention span is so short. And so I think as an industry, we've relied on the science for years, and the science is sound and it's wonderful, and kudos to all of you who have been a part of that. But consumers kind of burn out on it. The emotional story, the connection is where we're going to be able to hit home with them. And I think by doing that, then we can tell them the science. So it's telling that story in a different way. I have a colleague here who talks about taking a PhD and turning it into ADD, and it's kind of he's kind of accurate. Like, we've got to get those bite-sized nuggets, but consumers are not going to listen to us talk about science for hours or even minutes at a time. But don't stop the research. The research is important. Everything that we do has to be grounded in research, just like all of the consumer data that we have is grounded in research.
So to follow up on that question, Bruce, to a certain extent, is there an elevator speech or pitch that we can use as and share with consumers?
Yes. And I think I would, I just go back to real pork. And I'll actually read you. I have my little elevator speech for real pork right here, right next to my desk. And this is about real stories, real farmers, real farms, and the real way that people feel when they enjoy the authentic flavors of pork. And I think going back to that word authenticity it's what the entire master brand is built around. Us telling our story in a way that's different than we've ever told it before. And I will tell you, for some of you, and again, I can't see everyone, but anyone who's been in the industry a really long time, we're showing up differently as a National Pork Board when it comes to marketing. The tactics that we're doing around digital marketing are very different. When you see the new website go live at the end of the year, it's very consumer focused, and it's going to be a lot of different colors and different imagery. And I'm incredibly proud of the team here for not just getting outside the box, but kind of there isn't a box. Like, we're out in uncharted territory. So.
Okay. A question here: how much room in the industry is there for the niche pork production systems, and do you think that will change?
Thank you for that question. In addition to the primary consumer marketing that we're doing, we are working really hard behind the scenes to build out some tools for niche farmers. there's absolutely a place. And I think if this year has taught us anything, it's that people are interested in supply chain, and there is a consumer out there who wants to buy things more local. So we're working on a toolkit right now. We have a basic toolkit that's done. And if you have any producers, any niche producers who are interested in our marketing tools, please, please direct them my way. We're also working with someone who's a former Google employee on how producers can more effectively use their digital tools to either tell their story or market their own products. So very important. I don't see it going away by any means. And we are working really hard to make sure that those producers who want to play in that space have just as many tools from the pork checkoff as their larger counterparts.
Question, how will we know if this program is the real pork program is successful? How do we measure that?
Yes, it's very hard to measure marketing when you're marketing an entire industry, but there are some key metrics that we will be looking at next year. One is that retail market share. So again, we have earned share away from poultry this year, and we're very focused on keeping that share. So that will be one indicator. We are also looking at menuing and how many pork items are on menus. Now, that measurement's going to be a little bit more difficult because 2020 has just been such an odd year. You almost have to throw the data out. But we'll be focused on how much pork is on menus. We will also be focused on so we don't look at per capita consumption because that's a number, that's disappearance. And we could spend hours talking about that. But any of you who have heard Steve Meyer talk about it, I mean, basically, we look at production numbers, and all of that pork has to go somewhere, and a certain portion of it is consumed domestically, and that's domestic consumption. But what we can look at is domestic consumer expenditures for pork. So that will be another measurement that we look at. We also continue to measure consumer sentiment. So it's a softer science, right? But we ask consumers how they feel about our products, and we will continue to drive sentiment to where we're increasing that in those 5 categories of what's most important to people.
All right, I've got a question here. The challenge with changing people's minds using social media and other internet-based forums that Google or Microsoft or otherwise track our searches and send us these unsolicited flags that promote or support my perceived interest or opinion. So example, if you look up plant protein recipes, it shows up in all of your social media streams and every time you open your browser, and even though you search for it once. So it's is there a way to get around this, and is any of this program worth looking at that?
Yeah, we're doing that too. So no doubt, digital marketing is really smart. And when we do YouTube ads, for example, or Google ads, we are targeting a very specific consumer, and those folks are targeting you all. So, so when I think about what their targets are, it's likely people who have shown an interest in plant-based but haven't purchased. So that's why you're getting those ads. In the same vein, we are sending those types of pork ads to consumers who are searching for pork and maybe aren't purchasing it, or maybe they purchased earlier this year and they hadn't purchased prior, and it gets a little well, it's a little scary actually how marketers can target. But the reason you're not seeing pork ads is because you're all consuming pork, and you're all in the space. And so we are very cognizant about spending our producers' dollars in the most impactful way. And so we're targeting those people that we want to get those repeat purchases from.
Okay. This might go live to your live production background a little bit, maybe, but the question that came in is, we haven't heard so much about the gestation stall issue recently. Mm-hmm. Is that an issue? Are we addressing that in the real pork? What is the conversation?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's still an issue. It's just been behind the scenes with a lot of other things happening in 2020. And as we get closer to 2022 and 2025, those were years when a lot of those organizations had set their targets for buying a certain percentage of their pork from systems that were, at the time they were calling it crate free, and then it changed to open pen, a variety of different definitions depending on the organization. We've seen a little bit of discussion about that behind the scenes. Honestly, a couple organizations have extended their deadlines because they realize that that they're not going to be able to source the product that they had set out to do. I will tell you, we've had some really great conversations with some organizations too about how they need to look at animal welfare more holistically, and how just looking at a housing system is really not their goal. And so I've been able to work with my colleague Sarah Crawford here to talk to organizations like Dunkin' Donuts is a good example, and I will tell you, we even talked to Chipotle this past year. Again, they called us in and said, "Hey, we kind of messed up this conversation in the past. How can you help us understand this from a bigger picture standpoint?" So I'm hopeful that there won't be any new statements come out. As you might imagine, for those organizations who made a commitment, it's really hard to go back on those. So we'll see how that plays out over the next couple years. But I find the discussions that I have with retailers and food service around sow housing to be much more evolved than they were even 3 years ago when I joined the Pork Checkoff. People are just thinking about things more holistically, and that's really positive for the industry.
All right, so next question I have here is, what do you feel is going to be the biggest hurdle for producers in the future with more environmental regulations? And just on the topic of regulations as we were there. And then how do we relay the message of what we are doing to protect the environment to the consumer?
Oh, the first part. The greenhouse gas discussion is really hot, and it's really heating up. And so I think as we think about that and how that affects us on farm, that's something we need to get our arms around really quickly. And how are we going to talk to consumers? We still have that to figure out a little bit. So we're starting some new research, maybe yet this year, but for sure in early 2021, to really understand where consumers are at on some of that messaging and what will break through to them. We recently saw an attempt by a fast food chain to do, some humorous advertising around cow flatulence that bombed in a really big way. And so we know that's not the way to do it, but we need to make sure that we're on point with our messaging, because we're going to get one shot.
Very good. Okay. I had a question I'd written down earlier. Are we targeting center of the plate, or are we targeting, how are we going to increase domestic consumption? Are we targeting more of those ready to eat products, or where are we? Where is this?
Yeah, our innovation focus would be much more ingredient based, convenience, ready to eat. And that is just that's where consumers are. No doubt there's still going to be a consumer that consumes protein center of plate, and that's not going to go away. But if we want to meet consumers where we are, we've got to get farther along the innovation journey. You look at the products that are available to them. For example, and I use chicken as an example a lot. They've done a really great job of being convenient, easy to prepare. There's no reason why we can't compete with them with loin and tenderloin. We haven't, and so we've got a lot of folks in that further processed area that are paying attention, and no doubt we have supply chain issues that we'll need to continue to work out as we go through some labor shortages and other things. But we're going to have to do better. We're going to have to be closer to the consumer in what they're looking for, and that's convenience.
Do you have comments how this might work with our existing principles? So as an extension, Swine Specialist myself, we teach the PQA Plus program, the TQA program. Are there things that we should be specifically highlighting within those programs, and any overlaps and things like that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. You know, when you think about PQA, TQA, awesome programs. And I will tell you, when I talk to retailers and food service operators about our industry and about our processes, I talk about the, PQA, TQA, and then there's some awesome plant audits that we use through our colleagues at NAMI. We talk about the common swine industry audit. All of the things that we do through those programs are done to make us better, and they're continuous improvement programs. So the programs themselves, though, they don't really resonate with consumers. And I will tell you that we care, which is amazing. Our 6 ethical principles of we care haven't really been consumer facing either. So real pork is how we're going to try to bring those things to life for consumers. And how you'll see it show up is the producer on the farm with his iPad, checking off his list, showing them that there are clear processes behind what we do. But you probably won't see us talking to consumers about the programs or about We Care itself. It'll show up in different ways.
So then in that, I guess that maybe brings up the question, are there materials available? How well can we access this information, share this information?
Yep, absolutely. So we have, I can send out links, or Ryan, however you want to do this, or I can post links in the chat too as I'm talking. We have wonderful resources available to all producers at library.pork.org. And if you search for real pork, you will pull up some images, toolkits. There's a fact sheet on there that talks all about the master brand and how it's going to show up for consumers, for producers. Also, if you are inclined to go to pork.org/realpork, that's where our consumer-facing content is. So library.pork.org, search for real pork, and you should get all the information you need. There's a FAQ document. Actually, I have it sitting on my desk all the time. It's about 6 pages long, and it has talking points and how you can tap into to some of the messaging, and just a lot of background too on the consumer insights that drove us to the master brand strategy.
Very good. Seeing we're coming close to time here, are there any final questions anybody wanted to submit or ask?
Such great questions. Thank you all so much for those.
All right, seeing none, hearing none, I thank you so much for your presentation today. Very interesting to hear about this real pork and the ways that we can access the information and share that information. And And again, this interesting use of influencers and the Google and YouTube results. So those definitely, as you resonate with my children more than they do with me, I think, but they are those ways forward, and so those type of things. So I appreciate your time today, and thanks very much for sharing.
Yep, thank you all for having me, and everyone stay safe and healthy.
Very good, thank you.